I'm the Holocaust Speaker Coordinator for Glendale Unified School District. And my parents and my grandparents escaped from Germany and survived the Holocaust. But we welcome you to this important, meaningful program. And today we're honored to have Ms. Dana Schwartz, who has been a Holocaust speaker for more than 40 years. She was a teacher, a therapist, and worked for Steven Spielberg's Shoah Foundation. Now you will be witnesses to the Holocaust. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Dana Schwartz.
Hi, Glendale. Hello, Glendale, I thought I would say. I usually speak about what it's like, what it was like for me, who was a 4.5-year-old kid, to go through the Holocaust and what I saw around me. So you sort of go on a trip with me through my time. I was born in Lvov, Poland. Now, you know, the countries are very close together, and so it was Russia, Poland, Germany. Germany, just, you know about Hitler, obviously, I'm sure he was an evil, evil man, and he decided to, for some reason, he had all kinds of ideas about getting an empire for 2,000 year old empire, and kill all the Jews and make the other countries into slaves or workers. He had all kinds of fantastic and horrible ideas, and we didn't believe it at first, but he got it done almost. Except that America and England and even Russia decided this is not going to work, and we won. So what was the Holocaust? You guys, you understand that there have been other Holocausts, I guess, in the past. You know, the Armenian Holocaust. This one was a huge amount of people. Germany was going to destroy all the Jews, they decided. And there have, you know, been 80 years of people wondering, how did he get to the Jews? But there was anti-Semitism there. And so he picked on the Jews to totally wipe out in Europe. But I want to tell you about what it was like for me, because I was a 4.5-year-old kid. How did I begin how did the war begin? I'll tell you. My babysitter took me to a park, and she used to take me to the park on a stroller, and then she'd leave me there because she didn't want to chase after me. So I was very, very frustrated sitting there while other kids were running around. But I decided that was a very good thing for me, because I learned the frustration of having to sit and be able to take it. This time, my nanny let me out, and I was looking at the grass. I was on my gravel path, and there was a grass daisy that I wanted very much. And so I went over the little wire fence, and I picked the daisy, and I heard a tremendous boom. And I thought, oh, God was angry at me for doing a bad thing. I knew I was doing a bad thing. And I ran back to the babysitter, and there was a man who, everybody was all of a sudden, I thought the message was for me, you know, and suddenly I noticed the other people also got the message, boom. And a man with a big white dog ran past me and said, "Go home, the war has started." So That's how I started the war. I remember feeling very guilty that I had done a bad thing by picking flour, and I had caused the war. My parents were very worried. They had known that something's coming, but they weren't sure. And my dad decided we're going to escape somehow. But you could not escape the Germans because the other countries in the world didn't want anything to do with it and would not permit Jews to come in. Did not give us a visa, and there is no way to get into a country without a visa. But my father said, maybe with money, we can try to get out to Romania, which is sort of to the side. The war wasn't happening there yet. Sorry, my phone beeps sometimes. So he hired a car and driver, and we went on a long ride. Oh, it was wonderful. We didn't have a car, so it was great for me at 4.5 to be riding this fancy car. It was very exciting. We were running away, and suddenly a biplane, you've seen biplanes, they have like double wings, came down on us and started to shoot us. And we were frightened, so we jumped out of the car and there was a corn growing next to us, and we jumped into the corn. The corn was high because it was September 39. When the war started, and we jumped into the corn and we hid in the corn. They didn't hit the car, they didn't hit us. They were bad shots, thank goodness. Well, many adventures later, some of them funny, some of them scary, we get to the border trying to escape. And it's like up the hill, there's a gate and some guards. And my mother says, oh, we're going to go through there and just keep on going and never come back to our house, to our apartment. And my father said, you know, this Hitler is not, you don't know what to expect from him. Obviously, it's scary. What would he say? He's going to kill all the Jews? Why would he do such a thing? This is the Western world. They're educated people. They wouldn't do anything so barbaric. Well, let me tell you, they did. They killed everyone. In my family, they killed everyone. But let me go on with the story. My mother kept saying, oh, honey, let's not leave everything, the Persian carpet, our silverware from our wedding, our beautiful picture. How can we just leave it? My stuff, my dresses, of course, Mom always loved her dresses. And my father finally gave in, you know. He said, well, honey, maybe we should go back. We went back. It was a terrible mistake. Soon, first the Russians came, they took my dad away to fight in the war, but he escaped. He was a very good tennis player, and he was very agile, and he jumped over a big wall. Came home. We were so excited when he came back. But they came looking for him, and my mother said, if you tell him where Daddy is, then we'll never see Daddy again. So I had to lie. I had never lied. I didn't know how to lie. And I tried very hard to remember not to lie, to not tell the truth. And they came looking for him. And I said, I don't know what my daddy is. And they kept pinching my cheek and saying, what a cute girl you are. Tell us where your daddy's hiding, okay? And I kept saying, I don't know. where's Daddy? I don't know. Anyway, I did not give him away. Thank goodness. And we lived together, and we're happy again. And then the Germans came. The Germans, they're very quiet and polite, and everything was done without any drama, supposedly. One day they knocked on our door and rang the bell, actually, and this amazing, a Superman looking figure, big and strong and with lots of, a huge uniform and colorful medals all around, and hat and boots, and he was awesome to look at. And he had 2 soldiers behind him. He said, "We'd like to look at your rooms." And Mother had to open the door, and he looked around. He said, "Oh, very nice, yes." He says, "Be out in half an hour. You can each take a little valise with your little bag." And I remember my parents, Mommy, they can't do that, but of course they could. And so, I remember my parents' shoulders. They lifted them. They tried to be proud and unafraid for me. And we took an extra pair of shoes and a sweater or something for me, and whatever. I had to leave my teddy bear, everything. And we walked out of our house, walked out of my childhood, went to the only place we were allowed to go, which was to the ghetto. The ghetto was well, first of all, we had to take, of course, we took my grandma and my uncle who was married yet, and an old lady who my father promised to take care of because her sons had gotten a visa to go to Portugal. They had met, I think, at the university, and they were very close friends. And they had a visa to Portugal from some friends or something, I don't know, or some assignment. They were journalists. And they couldn't go because what were they going to do? Leave their mother when a war is coming? And so my dad said, yes, you guys go and leave your mother to me. I'll watch out for her. So that lady came around, and she was a very funny lady because she thought she was so important. And it was very funny. We had nothing in the ghetto. We lived in 1.5 rooms, all of us. There was a light, but there was freezing, and there was a gas stove. And my grandma used to teach me how to warm my hands. And also it was, I think, to help me remember how to light lights on Friday night, because of course we were Jewish. That's why we're being hunted. One day, it was very cold, very miserable place, and we didn't go out much, but to tell you that when I went out on the street with my mother, I noticed that there was 3 big spots. And people would walk around very strangely around those spots. There was an awkward feeling there, and I found out that the Nazis, their job was to clean out all the Jews. So they got a hold of 3 toddlers by the legs, and they had a game. And they swung, and they were supposed to crash the skull on the first hit. And so there were 3 spots, brains of children who were used in the game. So no wonder everybody was walking around, funning around there. So I didn't go out very much. It was a terrible thing. Everybody, was reactive. And Daddy came home one day, and he would go out, and one day he came home and we were very hungry, and he brought he had a big bump under his coat, and he took out a bread. It was a wonderful bread. He cut it, it was round and dark, and he cut it and he gave me the first bite. And I was so excited, a whole bread. And I remember tasting it, and it tasted gritty. But I loved it. It filled my mouth. I was so hungry. But he said a bad thing is going to happen now. There's going to be an action. An action is like a cowboy. The cowboys herd cattle into the train, So it was very, very similar to that. Just imagine that the Germans went from house to house in our city of Lvov, and they, in lots of other cities and small places. And they herded the people. They got them out of the apartments. They herded the people, and they got them onto the train and said, we're just relocating you because there are jobs available in other places. They did not want to hear any screaming. So there's an action coming, and we have to find a place to hide. And we found a place for Grandma and the other old lady, the mother of the twin men who went to Portugal. And we hid them in another room. And there was one apartment near us that had 2 rooms instead of 1 room. So they put a few old people in that room and pushed the cupboard over the door so they wouldn't know there was another door there. They hoped to hide them there that they wouldn't be found. P.S. They found them, and they took them away, and that was the last time I saw my grandmother. By the way, my grandmother and her other daughters and grandchildren all got killed in another place called Stray, where they lived, and the Germans just put them all in sort of a low-lying place and shot them all to death. Anyway, we had to hide. We didn't know yet that they would find my grandma. We had to hide, and my father found a place. There's a hole under the big building. Sort of, if you go down this, there are 3 steps going up, and there's a way to get under the steps and under the house. It was a big hole, pretty big hole, and they had bottles, lots of old bottles people would toss in there, and that was a very good thing. Anyway, in the middle of the night, because I was asleep or half asleep, I remember something about going down sort of a tunnel. But I woke up the next morning, and I was in this hole, and there were other people. I don't know if there were 10 people or 5, no, let's say 10 or 12 people whom I didn't know, and they were all lined up in this thing that you couldn't sit up because it was low, but you could go on your on your arm, on your elbow. But I could sit up because I was little. By then I was 7. But I could still sit up, and my mother and father laid next to me, and other people laid around, and I said, "Yeah, I have to pee." And there was nothing to do but to pee in a bottle. My mother said, the bottle will come around and you'll pee, and people will turn away, don't worry. And indeed, people turned away. All those bottles came into use. And I peed. Pooping was not necessarily, we barely ate any. It was a strange place. Everybody had something put in their mouth, I think. My dad had a box of sugar cubes. Have you seen sugar cubes? In Europe, they used to have sugar cubes, so you wouldn't use too much sugar, you know. My daddy had these sugar cubes, which he popped in my mouth about 3 or 4 times a day, so I would have enough calories to survive. Water, we got the next night, every night at 3 o'clock in the morning, we would scurry out of that hole and out and from under the building. And the people would all exercise. They would exercise because they were, I guess, because they were afraid of not, of their muscles atrophying. So they would fill up their water bottles, was clean the bottles, some were maintained for one thing, some for another. I remember looking up in the sky and saying, God is so far away, he'll never see us here. And we'd crawl back up, filled with water bottles and nothing to eat. And one night, there came a woman with a baby at her breast. The baby was trying to suck like that, but it couldn't get any milk. And we were scared to death because that one baby would give us away completely. And the neighbors, who were very anti-Semitic and wanted favors from Germans, would certainly point out where the Jews were hiding. So, it was very, very scary with that baby. And everybody was saying to themselves, I imagine, I wanted to live, but I wanted to make noise. It's terribly embarrassing to have these thoughts. Anyway, the woman was right next to me. We were like this, and I kept seeing her eyes. The baby kept not making a noise and not getting any food. She also had 2 babies, 2 toddlers, were all wrapped up with shawls. I didn't know whether they were boys or girls. They must have been 2, 3. I don't know. And they sat next to her knees. And there was a boy whom I called David. I've given him that name. I had to give him that name, but he is in my memory forever. He was about 12. I don't know how old he was, but he kept saying, Mommy, if Dad hadn't been taken, he would have told me to go and find some food. Look, you have no milk. You have to, the baby will die. And she kept saying, no. I tell you what the plan was for kids that age, teenagers. Maybe he was 14, maybe he was, I don't know how old he was. These kids did something really amazing. How did they get food for their families? I don't know that David had this in mind, but I'll tell you what they all did. They went out into the street, and when nobody was looking, they would lift the manhole and crawl down into the can't think of the word, I'm old, sorry, into the sewers. They would crawl into the sewers, and there were these little gates, these little balconies that were above the stuff that was flowing out. And the kids would go on those little skinny balconies and go out into the land outside the city. And that there were fields, and the fields had been already harvested, but once in a while they would find a cabbage or potatoes or whatever, and they would tie their pants at the bottom and stick whatever they could find, a carrot perhaps, and then they would walk back all that way back into the city and try to get out another manhole. But the Germans found out about this, and they thought it was great fun. It came to them. So they would stand around and they would wait till the manhole would move and they took photographs of it. And they would look around like that. There was a photograph. A German took a bunch of photographs. So they'd stand around and smoke and have their rifles ready. When they see that, they would lift the manhole, pull out the kid and say, shake your pants. Let's see if anything falls out, you're going to get a bullet in your head. And that was a big honor as far as they're concerned, because they know that this young person, boy or girl, would suffer and die a terrible death. So why shoot him with a gun? It's ammunition. We don't need that. We can kill any kind of way. But so they consider it an honor that if that boy or girl shook out the pants and food fell out, they would automatically get shot. And I think that the mother lying next to me with a baby knew that. And I think she was terrified that that would happen to David. And she wouldn't let him go. And he kept, badgering her to go, that they had to eat something. And finally she said yes. She said yes. And he kissed the baby and kissed the toddlers, kissed his mother, and promised to be back as soon as possible. And then I remember her lying there and waiting and waiting. He never came back. And I remember her eyes so close to mine. And I know what terror looks like. It was so dramatic and so close to me. And my mother was so taken by that. And she kept whispering to my father. The next night she had me, a couple of nights, I guess. She took me out and she went upstairs where we lived next door to some Ukrainians, as it happens. And they were moving the next day. So she knocked on the door and she says, look, I have this very pretty ring. I'll give it to you if you'll hide my daughter for 1 week. So they took me with them when they moved out of the ghetto. So I was fine. I want to tell you just quickly that my mother, had this week not to worry about her kid. So she went to another neighbor and she said, would you hide me for a week? I have this red, beautiful ruby ring. Will you take that and in exchange? Yeah, he said, fine, I'll take you to my office out of the ghetto. Who was also not Jewish, and he could move whenever he wanted to. So the two of them walked out the next morning looking like, pretending to be two lovers. And he knew the guards, so there was no problem. He took her to his office. That was a room on the second floor, no bathroom facilities or water or anything. He said, I'll leave you here. I'll lock the door from the outside, but I'll bring you food and water. And he did not come back. And my mother kept looking and looking, and for the next day looking and looking. And she had, she was dry and scared and didn't know how much time she had to live. and she saw the branch of a tree was not too far from the window. And she decided there was only one thing she could do, and that is lunge for the branch. If she didn't make it, well, she wouldn't have made it inside that room anyway. So she took a chance, and she did lunge and make her way to the trunk and then shimmy down. And then she found our old babysitter lived, she found near, not too far away. She found the name and she went upstairs. She lived on the top floor. She knocked on the door and she said, "Please hide me." "What are you doing there?" said the nanny, the babysitter. And she said, "You can't come in because I would give you, but my husband will give you away." So she said, "Sit on the top step and I'll hide you as soon as he's asleep." So he went to sleep. My mother sat there shaking, and she came out and took her down to the cellar. They each had like a little room where they would hide their folding beds or whatever extra stuff, like we use the garage, I guess. That was small. She brought her soup. She brought her hot potatoes. She had a blanket. She was in heaven. She could rest, rest from the terrors. And she was there for a few days. All of a sudden, one night, she hears boots. Boots were a terrible sound. They always, meant death at the end. And the Germans were saying, "Okay, janitor, open these doors." Even here in the Arabs, in the Aryan section, Jews could be found. Maybe they're hiding somewhere. Let's see, open these doors. So the janitor would open one little room after the next, and my mother could see the flashlights under her door. And when they came to her door, they said, "Well, open the door." And he said, "It's not on this keychain." And my mother said, "Well, they said, well, where is it?" And the janitor said, "Upstairs, I guess, the ladies." And so he went up. They told him, "Hurry up." And they're standing there waiting and waiting, to open this door. And my mother's saying a prayer. When you're dying, you say this prayer, I guess. And she was waiting. She knew they wouldn't even take her anywhere because their guns were cocked and ready to shoot. A dog came and started playing with him. A dog came again, started playing with him, and he ran back and forth, played with them, and ran away. And they said, "Look, that dog must want to show us something. Let's go see what he has to show us." And the janitor is coming down, and they said, never mind. We want to see where this dog is going." Hour later, the babysitter came down. They were both terrified because she would be in trouble too for harboring a Jew, and they could get killed for it. And or whatever, I don't know. But she apologized and thanked the lady profusely, went home. You could get into the ghetto, you just couldn't get out. When my week was over hiding with those Ukrainians whom my mother gave a ring to, those Ukrainians who lived next door and moved, the man came at the middle of the day and brought me back to the courtyard, from wherever they were living. And I knew that I was standing in the courtyard. It was noon, high noon, I suppose. And I knew that what I wanted to do is to lunge for those 3 steps and underneath and try to crawl down into that big hole. And I knew that the neighbors were looking. And I couldn't do it. I knew I couldn't do that. I would give them away. So I sat down like this, looking around and looking forlorn and saying, Daddy, are you still there? So that the neighbors couldn't see me talk. My dad was so grateful. Thank you, honey. I can't tell you how much it meant to me not to give them away. I was very proud of myself. And he said, go down to the cellar. And that very day, we decided we met, we loved each other, we were happy. And then we just decided that we had to try to escape somehow. My dad found a friend walking the streets, and the man asked for my mother, and my father said she is very, very bad, very, very nervous. And he said, I know where you can find fake Aryan papers that you're not a Jew. And he came home and he discussed it with my mom, and it was decided that Mother and I would go on fake papers with a fake name. He couldn't go because he was circumcised. Any man walking the street would be put into a doorway and said, let's see, and they'd have to prove they were not circumcised, because only Jews were circumcised in Europe during that time. So he couldn't go. But we found papers, and we decided that we would have fake names, and I decided that I would have to learn to be a different religion and pray different prayers. My mother would wake me up. What can I tell you? It was such luck. My father found a man who he begged to take. He was from a little village who was selling eggs in the city or someplace. And if I pay you this much money, will you take my wife and daughter with you to your village and say she's your cousin's wife and he's fighting in the war, and you don't know where he is, and he wants to kind of look out for her. So he said yes, he would. Very many dramas later, I was smuggled out, I don't know how, out of the ghetto. I was asleep, I think, 7. I don't know how. I don't have a memory of it. And my mother and I took off our Star of David. So we had papers. We were not Jewish anymore. We were outside. We got smuggled out, and we were outside the ghetto, but we were going to meet my father. To make a long story short, Jews were allowed to deal with non-Jews for, I'll give you silver if you give me a piece of bread, that kind of thing. And that was permitted. So right in front of the gate, in front of the Germans guard, my mother and I went to meet my father to say goodbye and pretend to do some business. My mother said, you don't know this man. You don't look at him. You don't touch him. You keep your arms down at your sides. You can't pretend. You have to pretend you don't know him, because the guard sees you being friendly to a Jew, then he'll know the whole story. And so my father and my mother and I said goodbye. Only I didn't say goodbye. My mother looked very strict and unfriendly, you know, because she had to look very businesslike. And I can look, but I could not smile. I could not react. And I wanted so much to say goodbye to my father because I thought I probably wouldn't see him again. And so I had to turn away quickly with my arms down in my sides, tight, not look at him again, not turn around, walk away without any emotion. And that was very hard for me. We did go. I'm looking at the time, it's so quick. So I'll just tell you, we did go to a hiding place. My mother bartered her engagement ring and her watch and stuff like that for pieces of bread. We pretended to be not Jewish in that town. So we had bread to eat, and that's all we needed. We saw some terrible things happen. Some very wonderful people die in front of me. Some people heartlessly pointing to Jews where they didn't have to do it. We met some kind people as well. We survived in that village. We came back from the village to the big city. Out of 350,000 Jews that were in the ghetto, no one survived. The doors were open because nothing. My dad was killed in a concentration camp. Everyone in our family was dead, was not to be found, dead, obviously. We were very lucky my mother threw me in back of a truck that was going west away from the Russians because the iron wall was coming down, you know, you couldn't get out of Russia. But my mother threw me in back of a truck. We ran west, and we were amazingly lucky to find out that my mother's boss had survived in a very amazing, funny way because his girlfriend helped him. Everything was gone. Everything was dead. No one came back to the city. It was very tragic. Anyway, we made it. It's late, so I'll tell you quickly. We made it. We went to Sweden to to be able to come to America. It took us 5 years. We were alone. Some of the time we were homeless too. Sometimes, and America was a dream that was true. We came here, my mother and I, and we were so happy and so grateful. My mom died when I was 17. And in spite of the fact that I was a total orphan, I was somehow able to go to school and work and become, of all things, a school teacher, because I had never had a chance to be in the school, and I was dreaming of being a kid in school. And so I made it. I became a school teacher, so I was in elementary school after all. And then I became a therapist, and then I worked with Steven Spielberg to get the story of other survivors, the most amazing stories. I didn't tell you any of the horrible stuff that happened. There are plenty of stories about that. I just want to tell you that that all that truly happened, and that I amazingly survived. And I think I survived to tell. I feel like everybody whom I loved was gone, and nobody even mentioned it. So I felt like I needed to let people know. I think the thing I want you to know most of all is how lucky you are to be living in this country. How lucky you see, you see a policeman and he's there to help you, not to kill you. And the fact that you can speak truth and you can be whoever you are and you can have whatever last name you want, doesn't matter what religion you are, it's your own thing. There is such greatness in this country, and when I came here, I saw it. And so I made a beautiful family of my own. And I went back to Poland. And believe it or not, I went to that village and I found the baker who gave us the bread for my mother's engagement ring. And look what I was able to find. My mother's engagement ring after 47 years. I found this and I wear it all the time. It's the symbol of my past and my family, and I love wearing it. And I just want you to know how lucky we all are to be here and to have all our freedoms and to live in such a wonderful country. And it doesn't even snow here in LA, which is great because I used to freeze to death. Really cold and sleeping in forests and under houses and not such good places to have such a good life, and such an honor to be here and talk to you. I hope you know there was such a thing as a Holocaust, and it was very dramatic and very interesting, and you might want to read about it. I hope if you have any questions, there are no time for question, but there's no time for question, but if you want to write me and please do. I won't answer because it's too much for me. But if you've listened to me, I hope I imparted to you that life is good. Sometimes it's terrible. You just hang around and it'll be good again. And be strong because it pays off. So thank you. Bye.
Can we get her applause now? Students?
Thank you.
So we ask all of you to write thank you letters about what you learned and what you feel about what you learned. And can you relate this to your family, and how does this apply to today's world? Because we have problems, and it's going to be your input that will help change our world to a better place. But thank you so much, Ms. Schwartz. Let's give her a hand, please, students.
I'll be back next year. Thank you. You know that what's happening in Europe right now with the Russians is on the same land. It's so weird. Yeah. I hope they don't start any nonsense.
Right. So thank you so much. And students, just remember everything that you've learned, please, and type it or put it in your handwriting, either way, and we'll get the letters to you.
Ms. Schwartz,
we'll get the letters to you.
I'm very happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're going to close it, it's fine. But if you're not going to close it, I have a moment. I noticed on my clock that I have a couple of minutes, and I will tell you one quick thing about
I forgot.
Is it gone?
No, you do have a couple of minutes.
Good. All right. So Lily, I loved Lily. Lily was my first and only friend when I was a little girl before the war started, and she was better at everything. She was better as she was already doing ballet, and she was learning how to play the piano, and she was terrific. She was very smart. And my mother used to say, why don't you do it like Lily? And so I did it like Lily, and she was right. Anyway, I love Lily. And after the war, we found a neighbor who said, do you know what happened to Lily? Whom we asked, do you know what happened to Lily? He said, yes. Lily was on the march with her dad. Her mom had been taken away already, and they marched in a long line to a great big pit, and she was holding on to her dad, and they would take a bunch of people and shoot them, and they would fall into the pit, and then they would take the next bunch of people and shoot them, and they would fall into the pit. And when it came to Lily, she kept clinging onto her dad's legs, and he got shot, and she didn't let go, and so she fell in with him. And then they took another one. At the end, they took our neighbor and shot him, but he was wounded lightly, and he fell in, and he was on top, and he was able to make it out. And he made it out fine. And he remembers that Lily did not make it out. And she was so smart. She would have changed the world. And I just want to remember Lily. Thank you for listening.
Oh, yeah. Because we all have to remember and never let anything like this happen in the world. Not just America, but anywhere in the world. We cannot let any Holocaust happen. And thank you so much. Let's give another hand.
Thank you.
Thank you, students and teachers.
Thank you so much, Ms. Schwartz and Mr. Meyerhoff, for being with us today. We learned so much about this important history, and we really appreciate you sharing these really difficult memories and your experiences. So thank you so much.
Bye-bye.